Welcome to New York Central's Ghost of the Rails movie, Volume 1, Cincinnati to Columbus. Here we start off in Sharonville with a couple photos of some NYC, Penn Central, and Norfolk Southern, as it is now today. This is where our journey will begin. We start off here with the Sharonville Big Ford Depot, situated just down the street from the Sharonville Yard. We move up to a place called Modsville at Tylersville Road to catch westbound 375, an all-loaded steel coil train heading west. 375 is led by an AC 44C6M and an ES 44AC, just 8 cars into the train. 4573 is brand new, tell because by it's a little bit shiny. The ES 44AC is only 8 cars in the train behind those steel coil loads. I'm only guessing, but I think it has to do with the tonnage of the train and how many empties are behind the DPU. Looking west down the line towards Sharonville, over here in this parking lot off to the left, is where the Modsville Depot once stood. Here it is standing on the same side, but this time looking east towards Middletown, Dayton, Springfield, and eventually Columbus. The area now is a rent-a-center and a State Farm agency under a giant billboard. This is an old photo of what the Modsville Depot used to look like. Next we move up to milepost 228 on the NS Dayton District, former Big Four, to the Middletown Depot. Built in 1900, it was constructed for the Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, St. Louis, also known as the CCC and STL. Nowadays, it's a whistle-stop gift shop, open 6 days a week, 10 to 5, and closed on every Sunday. Moving farther into Middletown, we discovered the old Big Four Freight House, still with Big Four Depot written on the top of the wall. I had no idea this existed until a couple friends of mine pointed it out. Our next location is Carlisle, Ohio, where the crossing of 3 different roads of the NYC Cincinnati Northern, the NYC Cincinnati line, and the B&O Toledo sub. We're at the Central Avenue crossing looking at some of the crossing gates near a gas station. Next, we walked a couple hundred feet to the Carlisle Junior Garden Club. This was constructed to honor and commemorate all those who fought and lost their lives in World War II for the freedom of this country. There's also a plaque that tells you about a little bit of the history of the Carlisle Station Depot that once stood here. I believe they moved it a couple miles back. I never found it. On whatever is remaining of the ex-Cincinnati Northern is CSX's maintenance of way equipment, starting a new project here soon, but with nobody around. The lead 2 maintenance of way pieces caught my attention as they were painted in the digital camo to honor those veterans that fought in those World War IIs and the ones that are currently fighting over in wars overseas today. Pretty cool. Never seen one of those before. About 50 feet or so is the former junction of the ex-Cincinnati Northern and the B&O, currently now North End Carlisle siding. Over on the CSX, the milepost sign tells you how far the distance is from the next terminal. Going north is a sign with a T and the letters 158, telling us you're 158 miles from Toledo. On the other side, going south is a C44, meaning you're 44 miles from the terminal of Queensgate Yard in Cincinnati going south. Standing on this side, this is where the tower guarding this interlocking would have stood, opposite to the tracks and opposite to the side of where I'm standing. Here are some old photos of what some of the towers looked like back then. I believe this one was down over on the NS where it crossed the Cincinnati Northern. Even a rare photo of the tower itself of where we just were. Looking south on the CSX at the north end of Carlisle siding, we see a high green signal calling for CSX M351, daily Chicago, Illinois to Cincinnati, Ohio manifest heading south. On this day, being led by one of CSX's new special units, the CSX 4568, painted to honor the 50th anniversary of the Operation Lifesavers program. It was pretty cool to see this thing leading, as this thing was only about a week or 2 old and had just come out of Chicago after an event, and they put it to lead M351. M351 is daily manifest with a stop to work in Garrett, Indiana, up on the CSX Garrett sub. He turns south at Industrial onto the Toledo sub, usually changes cruise in Lima, and then heads on to Cincinnati. That's Rex Woes right there shooting, and on the other side, the guy in the green neon sweatshirt is Tyler Dixon. He was down there with us today. Mid-train is CSX 3184 and ES44AH running as distributed power. Next, we find another old depot on the ex-Cincinnati Northern, about a mile or 2 south of where the Dayton District is. Looking kind of north and south on the ex-Cincinnati Northern, it ends at R. Good Industries factory yard, about a mile or 2 from here. where it dead ends and breaks out into a spur. Looking back towards the Dayton District is a rare form of street running that the NS local can use to access the industry. Here's a photo by Lowell Sutman of a PC train in Carlisle, Ohio. About a little bit later, we moved up to Union Road for eastbound NS train 170, daily Chattanooga, Tennessee to Conway, Pennsylvania manifest, with an ET44AC leading a -944CW. .170 has quite a bit of work stops on its way to Conway. It usually stops in Danville, Kentucky to sometimes pick up cars. Then we'll stop in Guest Street to get a new crew, also pick up some cars there. Also stop in Sharonville to pick up and swap out. And on an as-needed basis, he'll do the same thing in Middletown and Moraine, then the same thing in Watkins and Columbus, and then in Mansfield, Ohio as well, and sometimes Canton, Ohio. A lot of work stops for this train. Next, we move to the Dental Depot. It's still in its old form of the Big Ford Depot in Miamisburg. This is open 8 to 5 on Monday through Thursday. These are old photos of the old depot, and especially this one from 1913. Our next location will be at the Dayton Light and Power Plant, or at least where it used to stand, where NS 170, the one we saw back at Carlisle, is waiting on in westbound 171 to clear. As you may have guessed, 170 and 171 are counterparts, generally hauling the same kind of material. 171 is usually the empty haul of the 170, which is usually the loaded haul. Is of decent size today. In a little bit, he'll be passing the old Moraine yard where the GM plant once stood. After the GM plant closed, the Dayton District saw a real decrease in traffic. 171, noticed, is carrying trash containers, although most people will think it's just intermodal. These are loaded with trash off the coast of New Jersey, brought into Conway by a different train, and sorted onto 171. Takes it down to Chattanooga to be properly disposed of. The next area we wanted to go to was the old Union Station in Dayton. Served both the NYC, the B&O, PRR, even served Amtrak at one point, and even served the Chesapeake in Ohio. Here's a picture of the Amtrak at Dayton Union Station. And here's another one of B&O entering the Dayton District. The next place we moved on to was Osborne Yard, another NYC Big Four yard. The tower and the station are no longer around. Now it's in place of an old NS maintenance of way area. The next place we went to was 190. Over there is a freight house belonging to, I think, the NYC of the Erie. And right there is a grain train heading west being led by the NYC 1066. The gravel area off to the right, where Tyler Dixon shot this train, is the Old Erie right-of-way, which paralleled the NYC all the way into Dayton. Down there is railfan Spud Garrett, who's also standing on that right-of-way. Later, a few days later, we were down here to film 178 heading eastbound on the Dayton District at 190. Here he was led by a solo AC-44C6M. Usually, a solo unit on the front of 178 means of either one or two mid-train or rear DPUs. and today was the case. .178 is General Manifest out of Irondale, Alabama to Belleville, Ohio, with work stops along in Danville, Georgetown, Kentucky, Sharonville, Ohio, and Middletown, Ohio. You may also notice that this train carries a lot of steel. Midpoint in the train was an NS-SD70 ACE and a -9 44CW. These guys were kind of towards the end of the train, but still count as mid-train DPUs. Heading westbound is L10 up from Middletown. He's come here to drop off and pick up some cars at the I&O's Water Street Yard in Springfield, with a big SD40E doing all the work today. The next spot on the Dayton District is the other side of the Enon passing siding, CP188, formerly known as Cold Springs and still referred to Cold Springs by rail fans today. This is where the Erie came in to swing west and run alongside the NYC. It also came in from the P&E side, which headed out northwest of here. Our next spot of the location on the Dayton District is CP185 in Springfield. On a sunny day, we find an approach diverging, yellow over green at 185. Signaling to the westbound, move past the signal at medium speed, and then approach the next signal not exceeding medium speed. If your train is going faster than medium speed, begin reduction once you get up to the signal. It's for westbound 179, led by two big Union Pacific GEs. .179 is the empty counterpart to 178 and carries generally the same amount of things: boxcars, tank cars, and empty steel back to Irondale. Pushing on the rear of the train today was an NS SD70 ACC, no doubt an SD70 rebuild. He was going downhill, so the train was not in Notch 8, but will be eventually when he leaves Enon for whoever he's meeting with. .185, although it may not look like it, was where the P&E branched out and head west, and eventually up to Cold Springs. That signal up there is original Big Four era, about 5 years before the NYC took over. Tyler Dixon was down here when he caught NS 1066 leading loaded grain train 40Z past those signals. Here we see side tracks sitting off to the left on West Main Street. At one time, the ex-Big Four freight house. Here, passing that freight house at West Main Street, is eastbound 178. On this day, led by a solo SD70 ACE with two distributed power units on the rear of the train. On the bottom of the train was an NS ES44DC and an NS ES44AC. under remote control from the head end locomotive. Here we come to Springfield, Ohio, where we see old pictures of the old Big Ford depot. The depot is gone now. Now where South Limestone flies over it was where the top of the depot is. What remains of it is an old PC freight station. Never really served any passengers, though. We'll see a couple run-bys here. Here we see a run-by of NS 170 going by where the depot once stood. Leading the way is an AC-44C6M, a -944CW, another AC-44C6M, an SD-70 Ace dead in tow, and a Canadian Pacific SD-70 ACU painted in the script heritage unit first dawned on by the Canadian Pacific. After 170 cleared, that L10 we saw back at 190 heads west out of Water Street, heading back to his home base in Middletown, Ohio. Late one night, I was down here for a mysterious eastbound. I bet it was 170, but I didn't have my radio with me, so I didn't know his ID. The light here has recently been replaced from the sodium lights to LEDs, making the area around the tracks more lit up for better videography of trains. But I would advise be careful down here at night. There are some weird people out there, and I would hate to see anything happen to one of you guys. On another bright and sunny day, we see eastbound NS 170 passing by where I was a couple nights before. But this time with an even better surprise with an NS ES 44DC and one of UP's heritage units, the 1983 Western Pacific. That unit, although not leading, would drag a lot of rail fans all over the eastern part of the state, up north from Columbus and east over towards Cleveland, to come out just to see that thing. It's not every day we get a UP Heritage unit or a Heritage unit of anything other than NS over here on the Dayton District. Down on the lower right is railfan Drew Reiser, Train Spotter 4002 on YouTube. And that was a Burlington Northern coal hopper that you just saw go by on the screen. Yet on another day finds 170, this time a little bit much of a better day. In the lead is an AC44C6M, a -944CW, and 5 RJ Corman units, all with past ties to past railroads. Even one that had ties to the DT&I and Grand Trunk, and one to the Western Pacific. I'm not sure which one it was. Yet another 170 goes through the area where the old Big 4 station once stood, this one led by a -944CW and AC44C6M. Just like the 170 from about a week ago, this one this time has 3 RJ Corman units dead in tow. I think NS was helping doing a service check on these guys. .179 heads westbound at the Heritage Center in Springfield, Ohio. On the other side of me is the Clark County Library over there on the other side of the tracks. 179 led today by a BNSF GEVO and an NS-944CW on the head end. .179 is one of those weird trains on the Dayton District where you don't know what he's going to have from one day to the next. It can either be car-wise or power-wise or lengthwise. as today we were not expecting to see a BNSF leader. And shoving on the rear was another BNSF ES-44C4 under remote control by the head-end BNSF. Here's a photo of what Linden Avenue used to look like back in 1968. We move over there to catch NS 171 heading westbound. That's Drew Reiser in front of us, goes by TrainSpotter 4002 on YouTube. Spud Garrett was also with us, but he was back behind us. Union Pacific SD-78 second in their new paint scheme. UP is doing it with eventually all their locomotives, removing the flag and putting them on the corner of the nose. I'm not really sure what rail fans think about it. I've heard there have been mixed reviews and thoughts on it. But it's a little cool to see it anyway. Can't be real choosy out here anymore. You may not have noticed at the time, but this is actually the site of a former diamond that used to branch off towards the PRR's branch line down to Xenia. I'm set up here for a loaded grain train heading westbound with 2-9s and an SD-70 Ace. The track that begins to branch off leads down to INO's Water Street Yard. This is the signal that guards it. It replaced a dwarf signal. Grain trains are more common around this area around later in the year, around October, November, December, and a little bit of January too. I think they go as far into February, but I'm not exactly sure. Here we see the local heading down in 182, heading down to Water Street. Led by 6315, he's got a single covered hopper he will drop off to the INO, and he'll pick up about 8 more once he gets down there. They do this ritual every few days, I'd assume, sometimes once a week. For this shot of 170, I decided to walk a little bit past Linden Avenue up to the NS's East Leg Y. This is also a track that reverses and goes down toward Water Street. 170 is crossing Linden Avenue. In the background, you can see the Courtyard Marriott in one of the old abandoned buildings, and one of the village's retirement homes, and the NYC Freight House, as the -9 and an AC-44C6M lead the charge east. Next, we'll look at another interlocking, East Street. Off to the right over there, you can see DT&I's interchange yard with NYC. You can see it on the left side of this photo too. And still in the left photo as well, though at a different angle. This is what it looks like nowadays. The tower is gone, the yard is gone. Very little of it remains. But somewhere back in there, off to the right, remains the old DT&I freight house. This is the East Street crossing. The tower would stand, I believe, either on the side of me or across the tracks. Right there is I&O's industry lead down to Tri-State Forest Products. They get a couple cars a few times a week, sometimes maybe even twice a day. We see 178 heading east by that area. And of note is the two Grand Trunk auto racks behind the locomotive, right in the front of the train. This is a very nice catch. Bringing up the rear of NS 170 are two General Electric ES44 ACs pushing on the rear. Another day at East Street finds a weird indication, two reds over a green, which indicates slow clear, slow speed through turnouts, sidings, or switches, then proceed at maximum authorized speed. On the I&O backdoor track coming up to the NS, the track is not in good condition, so it's a slow 10 miles an hour. This setup is for a loaded grain train that just came out of South Charleston about an hour or two ago. A UP leader is a bonus today. This train would tie down in Enon as it would await an NS crew. The I&O can take it out to CP 190 and set it there, but an NS crew would have to take it the rest of the way. This is a nice catch here, as you don't normally get a full-size train coming off the back door, except for the grain trains during grain season. Next, we move a little bit east past Burt Street to a former location known as CP Kearney. The DT&I's tracks over there for the interchange are seen over here on the right, the NYC main on the left. Sadly, this is the CP Kearney area now. The tower is gone, the diamond is gone, but the track down to the DT&I yard still remains, even though it's all I&O now. The coaling tower and steam tower is visible in that direction. Meanwhile, over on the old NYC line, NS-178, led by two BNSFs and a Union Pacific Ace on the head end, come rolling east by where the diamond once was. Also, with a BNSF-9 mid-train, just only about 25 cars into the train. Next, we move out to Brooks Siding at New Love Road between mileposts 176 and 175 on the Dayton District. You wouldn't tell it from here, but at one time that land over there was occupied by a giant grain elevator, family owned. On this day, it was being stored with cars left by an NS-170 who couldn't make the hill the other night. This is actually a little known fact, but at both ends of the siding there used to be towers. Can't remember exactly what they were for. I'd assume for switching duties and mainline movements. On another more beautiful, less windy day, we catch 179 rolling by Brooks. This time an odd sight with a Kansas City Southern Gevo leading the way with an NS SD70 ACC trailing in the second position. As he rolls by, you can tell how much of a little bit of a hill that he's on. A leader other than a Norfolk Southern on the Dayton District, preferably a Kansas City Southern, is a nice attraction to rail fans down here. It's also a bonus that he has a BNSF SD70 ACE pushing on the rear of the train. Not a bad day out here today. Another spot east of there is at milepost 172, Plattsburgh, Ohio. It's not really a town, it's more like a little bit of a village, but at one time, during the NYC and Big Four days, it was a passenger stop. There used to be a depot right over there in that open space, but it was torn down some time ago. Track dating back to 1983 tells us that this was laid here shortly, maybe about 7 years after Conrail got the line. The tri-lights here are also Conrail era. Actually used to be down the road a mile at Buena Vista Road and was named CP-173. Then moved a mile back here to Plattsburgh. We're just in time down here for later in one day to see NS-170 roll by eastbound on its way to Columbus, with two C6Ms sandwiching a -944CW. NS 171 heads west by the Tri-Lights at Plattsburgh. 171 today was being led by an ES 44 AC and an SD 70 ACE. Of note of 171 on this day was all the N&W covered hoppers he was carrying. These were likely on their way to storage somewhere down south, or NS decided that they were done with them and decided to go scrap them. I never figured out if that's actually what they did. On a more windy day, we see NS-40Z, grain loads heading back to New Orleans, head west at Plattsburgh near the cemetery. The signal at 172 is green, so he's clear to proceed at maximum authorized speed. In the lead on this day, it just so happens that the NS-1066 was leading. He had gone up the Newcastle trailing third to Waterloo, Indiana the day before, and is now coming down west on the Dayton District leading. It's also a coincidence that this movie is about the NYC, and that Plattsburgh was once an NYC town. Another little known spot east on the Dayton District is K-Switch at milepost 169. This was once an 80-car siding, I think to do business with either cattle or grain. K-Switch is gone though, but the name still remains by rail fans. Heading west is 179, led by a Union Pacific SD-70 Ace and the Central of Georgia Heritage Unit number 8101 in the second position. Midpoint in the train was another Union Pacific, this one a GE, an AC-45 CCTE, doing as hard as it can up the hill into Plattsburgh. Next we move to milepost 167, known as Myers on the Dayton District. Myers once serviced a grain silo and had an 80-car siding and a little bit of a wayside depot, but no trains ever stopped there. Here is 178 heading east by Myers on a nice day, but sadly a little bit windy. Bringing up the rear of 178 is a lone AC 44C6M. On a more brilliant day at Myers, we see NS 171 heading west with an interesting contest. An NS ES 44DC leading, an SD 40-2 second, and a Union Pacific GEVO in the new flagless paint scheme third. .179 heads west at Myers. 179 had an interesting contest with an ET44AC, a BNSF in the Heritage 1 paint scheme, and an SD70 ACC pushing on the rear. These pictures capture what Linden, Ohio was once like. A nice little town on the NYC and PRR. This is a look at the diamond, the tower, and the interlocking. Here's a view of the Pennsylvania station. It's still here, actually. Here, this is a view looking west on what the line looks like now. The old Conrail tri-lights are still here. The PRR are now dead lines at the soap factory about maybe 500 feet down the line. Looking west, you can see where the interlocking tower and the diamond once crossed. I'm standing right on the old NYC right-of-way where it crossed the PRR in between those signals. The Pennsylvania station is visible over to the left. You can see where the main line was double-tracked, but the second main was ripped out right after Conrail got it. This is the view of the old NYC, now a bike trail on towards Lily Chapel, Georgiesville, and eventually Columbus. Down the street at Maple Street, where the old crossing was, is an old NYC crossing box. A little bit farther down, remnants of an old NYC siding are still here. Up here, this mound next to the red building would have hinted that maybe the NYC served this. I'm not sure if that's actually accurate or not. A little bit down is an old mile marker sign for the NYC. Going east, it's 163 miles to Cleveland. But on the other side, the milepost says this exact same thing. 163 miles to Cleveland. Now, usually it would be in the other side that it would be to Cincinnati, and it would be a lot farther. I'm not really sure why it says Cleveland on both sides. Especially if we're going west, you're not really going towards Cleveland, you're heading towards Cincinnati. 170 heads eastbound under the nighttime sky in London at Main Street. 170 has a Dash 944 CW, an NS, a Kansas City Southern ES44AC, and a Norfolk Southern ES44AC. 171 heads west at High Street near Oak Run in London, Ohio. 171 is being led by two Dash 944 CWs on line and four Dash 944 CWs trailing, going to Tennessee for either scrap or rebuilding into brand new AC-44 C6Ms. On another day sees 171 heading westbound through London. That tail end of a train in the siding is 170 waiting on him to clear. On this day, 171 was being led by an ES44DC and a rare BNSF-944CW in Heritage 1 paint. Now we get a look at nighttime here again at Main Street in London. This has become one of my most popular photo places and one of my favorites. The green signal at 162 down there is for NS 170, eastbound manifests out of Chattanooga, Tennessee to Conway, Pennsylvania. Interesting lash up of an NS AC-44 C6M, a UP AC-45 CCTE, an NS SD60E dead in tow, and the NS 1074 also dead in tow. The 1074 is dead in tow because apparently it had an engine issue or failure of some kind. 170 is taking him to Conway, and another train will take him and drop him off at Rose Yard, and eventually it'll get over to Altoona's Uniata shops for inspection and possibly to get put back into running service later on. Friend Rex Woods right there was out there with me this night catching this train. 179 gets going west at 162. In a minute, when I pan the camera around the other direction, you will see how he swings off the PRR and onto the NYC. .179 carries miscellaneous freight heading for Irondale, Alabama, with some work in Middletown, Ohio. Some of these steel coils will be dropped off in Middletown, as well as some tank cars. Mid-train was an NSAC 44C6M burned on one side and sounded like one of the engines was stuck in a weird position, which made him sound really weird. .171 heads west through London as he's about to swing onto the NYC, led by an SD-70 Ace and a Union Pacific AC-45 CCTE. Another bright day, and another 171, this time being led by an ES-44AC and a Union Pacific AC-44CW, I believe ex-Southern Pacific. Behind him was this 179 led by a UP Givo Solo. Bringing up the rear of 179 is another Union Pacific AC-45 CCTE, shoving as hard as he can to get this train up the hill. Led by an SD70 Ace and a CSX AC44CW, 171 heads west through the nighttime sky after coming out of the siding, leading 4-944CWs going for rebuilding in Chattanooga. A rarity on the Dayton District is whenever you get to see anything other than UP or BNSF, since they're common all the time. Like tonight with a Canadian National Jiva leading 179 west through London. Casey's drive-thru and carryout has LED lights so we can view the train. It's a little dangerous because it's a little bit close to the tracks, but we did make sure to keep our distance. Both Tyler Dixon and Rex Woods were out tonight shooting this train. Midpoint in the train was an NS ET44AC, shoving and pulling his part of 179. .179 is seen here heading west through London. The leader on this train had a crazy horn that sounded like one of the chimes wasn't working. And forgive me if I sound like a broken record stuck on replay, but midway or towards the end of the train, 179 has another Norfolk Southern DPU, this one also an ES44DC, like the second unit on the head end. The last train we will see on the NS and existing portion of the Dayton District is 171, with an interesting lash-up of an AC44C6M, an ES44DC, an SD40, a GP60, and a -944CW. Next at Lily Chapel, another NYC stop, and used to have a depot here. This was part of the line that ran through Springfield, Dayton, and eventually into Cincinnati. The little switcher rests quietly. Looks like it hasn't been used for some time. Lily Chapel is now just used for storing grain cars and whatever decides to come down here. The line is ran on by Camp Chase. Looking off to the west, it gives us a reminder that we are really in the ghost of the rails. To think of all the stuff that's passed through here in those heydays. It's a sad reminder to document what you can. Another spot on the line was Georgesville. A few little bit away from Lily Chapel. They also had a depot and a couple barns here. This is looking east towards Columbus on that line. The next spot is Miami Crossing, where the NYC crossed the PRR on its way up to Columbus, Lewis Center, and onward towards Galleon. This is the view that it looks like today. The line is now owned by Camp Chase. The diamond was removed. The double track was removed. The tower is long gone. Remnants of it still remain. That switch there is where Camp Chase comes onto the Norfolk Southern to go down the Watkins Yard. It really is a sad, sad thing that most of everything east of London is undocumented. We were able to do this, so we hope we brought a little bit of insight to everybody. And now here's some bonus footage of most of the rest of the line. Another spot on the old NYC line from Cleveland to Columbus to Cincinnati is Worthington, Ohio, where we see a B&O caboose on display. The trucks down here are original, I believe made in 1940-something, so nearly 100 years old. The Dayton District and the Burnt Line are actually, if you think about it, the same line. NYC used the Burnt Line, as it's called nowadays, to go up towards Columbus and to get to Cincinnati. An old Lewis Center signal station sits over on the side, not in use, but over on display. The Burnt Line runs up to the NS Sandusky line for a couple miles, and then they split off. Here, while we're there, we caught 170 heading north with an AC 44C6M, 2-9s, and an SD 40-2. We turned our cameras up to the north and we see another headlight on the Sandusky District. It's NS 171, heading southbound but running timetable eastbound on the Sandusky District. Another spot a little bit north of Lewis Center is Delaware. The connection over there is the end of the Delaware Loop Track. It's long thought of that the Delaware Loop around Delaware was the original main line. A green signal governs westbound C-398, Newell, Pennsylvania to cross South Carolina coal loads, with a trio of AC-44s, 2 up front and 1 pushing on the rear. Now we take a look at the CCC&I depot in Delaware, Ohio. It's right where the connection where the Delaware branch would have come off of the Burt line. The building is now up for lease today. There's a number where you can contact them about trying to buy it or maybe even rent it. An old sticker of the New York Central system proves who this depot used to belong to right after the CCC&I. Looking west towards the end of the track, you can see the intermediate signals and where the connection point of the Delaware branch used to come into. Near a grain elevator was a fascinating sight, an old passenger coach with the letters Frisco on it. But actually, after doing a little bit of research, we've discovered that this was not original Frisco at all, but rather another kind of company from the Rio Grande Western. For a long time, people thought this was a Frisco car, but now we uncovered the truth about what it really is, a subsidiary of the Rio Grande Western. Pretty cool, I think. Another stop along the way was in Miamisburg, where the Delaware branch now ends. This is a view looking east where the yard is. Off to the side at Heritage Co-op is an old Alco S2 switcher, formerly of Baltimore and Ohio. When the sun angle is good on most days on this side, you can actually see right through the paint and still see the Baltimore and Ohio logo on it. Looking east towards Delaware, we see where the grain cars would get stored when the track ends just a little bit in those woods. Off in this open spot over here where that truck is where the old Big Ford depot used to stand. But it was torn down quite a while ago. Conrail cut out this line east of here back in the 70s. Another place along the Delaware branch is Catawba, now just for grain silos and sometimes for people who store stuff here. This is the look of the line heading east into Mechanicsburg. Mechanicsburg is only about 5 or 6 miles from here. The track is still old and still governs really as needed trains nowadays, like grain trains and occasional I&O locals that have to take covered hoppers up there for loading. The towers are a little bit interesting here. It shows that they might have been recently washed over the past few years. On one of the crossing stands is a Conrail license plate, but technically these are called Conrail dog tags. Pretty cool find. A little bit away from Catawba is Catawba Station. It's a little complicated how these things got named like that, with Catawba being just east of here and Catawba Station being down here. The old bridge can give us a tell when it was first built, because the date is stamped on here 1928. NYC took over the line in 1930, making this a old original Big Ford bridge. Remnants of a water fueling station still here. Concrete base is here, but the tower is long gone. Another little bit messed is west is Moorfield. Here's a view off the old Delaware Branch into the Springfield Reservoir. Nice little view, especially on an autumn evening like this. We were trying to figure out to see what date the bridge was built in. And down here it even gives us a building by the King Bridge Cleveland Company in 1911, making this way before NYC.
Okay guys, we are now at Lagonda, where the NYC Big Four Delaware Branch would have crossed the DT&I. INO now owns both of these lines. Track going north to south is the Delaware Branch, and the track going east to west is the old DT&I. Back in the day, the Big Four would have had a depot here. Very little info is known on it, other than it was here at the Diamond. The Delaware Branch here goes up to Miamisburg, where it dead ends at a bumper. No longer goes up to Delaware, Ohio anymore. That was cut back in the 70s by Conrail. And the DT&I is mostly intact, other than the portion between Washington Courthouse, Ohio and Ironton, Ohio. That portion is no longer there. But everything all the way up to Detroit still is. Serviced by the Indiana, Ohio Railway. You can see here at Lagonda, a lot of the old signals are still here. There's the tilt target signal. Down that way is one of DT&I's old semaphore signals. And on down that way, you might be able to see it, is where the other DT&I semaphore signal is. Both of those signals are no longer connected. They have been disconnected longer than I've been alive, if that says anything. Okay guys, we are now at what would have been the main part of the Columbus Avenue yard. Here right along the side of Columbus Avenue, what gave the yard its name. Right here in this open space is where the turntable would have been. It was built by the Big Four and operated by them and the New York Central. I do not know when they tore it down. Not very much left. Possibly stuff buried under the ground, I'm not exactly sure. Can't really go beyond this point because it is private property. Just beyond that tree line is where the Delaware Branch is. The yard was on the Delaware Branch, which is kind of weird to me. They would have a yard the size this yard was on a branch line. Okay guys, I am now at the south end of what would have been the Columbus Avenue yard here in Springfield. I am standing on the old Sandusky main that branched off here and went up towards Sandusky. Here you can see one of the last remaining Big Four signal bridges on this line. This is the only one I know of. And over here to the right of it is the old Delaware Branch. This portion is still used by the Indiana and Ohio Railway to do interchanges with NS and to store some of the cars for the locals here in Springfield. INO calls it the Warder Street Yard because it's right here at Warder Street. But originally, as I said, it would have been called the Columbus Avenue Yard in the Big Four and the New York Central days. I guess we'll get a little bit closer look at the old signal bridge here. I believe where I am walking would have been 3 tracks originally, I think. There's one of the old yard lights. And over here next to the signal bridge is the old relay box that would have controlled it. It's been completely stripped of all its components. The Sandusky main did not have a connection to the yard, other than the obvious switch down at Warder Street. That is no longer there. Here's another look at the actual signal heads on the signal bridge. Definitely Big Four era. Pretty much nothing left of the old Sandusky main. As busy as this line probably was back in the day, I'm honestly surprised they ripped it up. Could definitely been used. But instead, you get what you see here in Springfield. The line is much the same everywhere else in Ohio.
Well, guys, that was it. That was the exploration of the old Dayton District, of what it originally was, and some of the bonus footage along the way. It's sad to see them neglect such old relics and rip stuff out, because nobody really gets to know what it really was, and it's not remembered as what it was either. It's a little bit sad. It honestly made me shed some tears, especially the eastern part, east from Springfield into Columbus. It is mostly undocumented, and it seems as though nobody really cared to. I will say, when Penn Central built the Buckeye Yard in there, that's when it largely got documented. But once it got ripped out, it almost seems like everybody just said forget it and just left, and there's like almost no documentation east of it. I figured we could bring a little bit of solace to that. I hope we did. I'll put our emails down in the description and our YouTube channels down in the description too if you guys have any questions for us. Hit the like button if you like this video. Subscribe at it while you're here. And hit the bell when I post a new video, or when either me or Tyler or Rex post a new video too. And until then, I am Yance Locomotive Works 8098. And I will see you guys later.